I never imagined I'd become the prime target of our HOA president's fury, but here we are. My name is Daniel, and I've lived in Oakwood Estates for 3 years now. It's a pleasant neighborhood with tidy lawns, uniform houses, and an HOA that enforces rules with an iron grip. And that iron grip belongs to Karen Wilkins, mid-50s, sporting the classic, "Can I speak to your manager?" haircut, and wearing a permanent expression of disapproval etched across her face. When I first moved in, I genuinely tried to stay under the radar. I read the HOA handbook cover to cover, planted only the flowers on the approved list, and painted my mailbox the exact shade of Oakwood beige the guidelines demanded. But none of that seemed to satisfy Karen. She had a unique gift for identifying violations that didn't exist anywhere in the rulebook. It started small. A notice about my garbage can being visible from the street for 20 minutes too long on collection day. A warning that my grass dared to grow a quarter-inch above the regulation height. Annoying, sure, but manageable. Then things took a bizarre turn last week. I came home from work and immediately sensed something off about my house. At first, I couldn't pinpoint what had changed. Then it hit me. My house numbers were different. Instead of the sleek, modern 518 I had installed when I moved in, there was now a set of dull brass numbers reading 8155. Someone had completely rearranged and replaced my address numbers. I stood there, baffled. Who would do this? And more importantly, why? I didn't have to wonder long. As I inspected the mismatched numbers, I heard the unmistakable sound of Karen clearing her throat behind me. I turned to find her standing on my lawn, arms crossed, wearing that smug smile she always wore when she believed she'd caught someone breaking a rule. "I see you've noticed the change," she said, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "Your modern numbers weren't in compliance with HOA aesthetic guidelines. Section 12, paragraph 4, clearly states that all house numbers must be traditional in style and between 4 and 6 inches in height. Yours were too. Contemporary." I took a slow breath, fighting the urge to roll my eyes. "Karen, check the guidelines before installing those numbers 3 years ago. There's nothing in there about the style of house numbers." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a laminated copy of what she claimed were the updated HOA guidelines. "Perhaps you should read the revised version. The board voted on these changes last month." She pointed to a highlighted section with a manicured finger. I skimmed the page and immediately spotted something odd. The document was dated last week, not last month, and the section about house numbers was in a noticeably different font than the rest of the text. Something was definitely off. "I never received notice about any changes," I said evenly. "And regardless, you can't just enter my property and replace my house numbers without permission. That's trespassing." Karen's cheeks reddened, but she tried to hold her authoritative stance. "As HOA president, I have the authority to remedy violations. It's in the bylaws." "Then show me exactly where it says you can enter private property and alter someone's home without consent," I challenged. Keeping my tone calm despite my growing frustration, she scoffed. "I don't have time to educate you on HOA protocols. The numbers have been changed. They're now compliant. End of discussion." She spun around and stomped off, her expensive heels clicking sharply against the sidewalk. "One more thing, Karen," I called after her. "Tampering with address numbers is illegal. They're not just decorative, you're interfering with emergency services." She waved a dismissive hand without looking back. "Don't be dramatic, Daniel. It's just numbers." What Karen didn't know was that I'm a municipal code enforcement officer for the neighboring city. I deal with violations, permits, property standards, and yes, address regulations every day. I knew exactly where the law stood on all of this. After she left, I pulled up the real HOA guidelines on my computer. As expected, there was zero mention of traditional number styles. The only requirement was that numbers be visible from the street and at least 4 inches tall. Karen had manufactured the violation and created a fake, hastily edited document to back herself up. The next morning, I restored my original numbers and installed a small, discreet security camera aimed at my front door. I had a strong feeling Karen wasn't done, and I was absolutely right. That evening, my camera recorded her creeping up to my door with a screwdriver and yet another set of brass numbers. The same generic ones she'd slapped on before. That was the last straw. I printed out the relevant sections of the municipal code regarding address tampering, along with screenshots from my camera. Then I drafted a polite but firm email to the entire HOA board outlining Karen's unauthorized entry onto my property and her illegal alteration of my address. I explained the safety risks that incorrect house numbers posed for emergency responders and included links to the ordinances that prohibited such actions. Naturally, I made sure Karen was CC'd on the email. Professional courtesy. The next day was Saturday. I was trimming my hedges when I saw Karen marching down the street toward my house, phone clutched angrily in her hand. Her face was nearly crimson, and she radiated fury. Several neighbors paused their own weekend routines to watch. "How dare you send that slanderous email to the board?" she screeched, not even attempting civility. "You've made me look like a criminal." I set down my garden shears and faced her. "I stated the facts, Karen. You entered my property without permission and tampered with my address numbers, which is illegal. I have video proof. I am the HOA president," she shouted, her voice reaching a pitch that probably echoed across the neighborhood. "I have every right to enforce compliance." By now, a handful of neighbors had wandered closer pretending to check their mail or pull weeds, but clearly listening in. "Being HOA president doesn't put you above the law," I answered calmly. "The HOA has no authority to trespass or alter private property without consent. And changing address numbers is a serious safety violation. If emergency services can't find my house because the numbers don't match their system, that could be life-threatening," I said firmly. Karen scoffed with exaggerated theatrics. "Oh, please. You're being ridiculous. It's just house numbers. Stop making such a big deal about nothing." "It's nothing," came a voice from behind her. We both turned. Mr. Jenkins, our retired firefighter neighbor from 2 doors down, was standing with his arms folded. "He's right, Karen," he said, his tone calm but firm. "Address numbers are critical for emergency response. We're trained to look for the exact numbers we're given. Wrong. Numbers cost precious minutes." Karen's eyes narrowed at this unexpected betrayal. "This doesn't concern you, Bill," she snapped. "Actually, it concerns the whole neighborhood," said another voice. Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street had joined the growing circle of witnesses. "If you're entering people's property and changing things without permission," she added, "we should all be worried." I could see Karen slowly realizing she was losing her grip on the situation. This is absurd," she sputtered. "I was acting in my capacity as HOA president to maintain neighborhood standards." "Show us in the bylaws where it gives you that authority," I suggested calmly. Karen opened her mouth, closed it, then abruptly switched tactics. "The board will hear about this," she snapped. "This kind of insubordination is unacceptable. Daniel is clearly trying to undermine HOA authority and turn neighbors against each other." Just then, a car pulled up to the curb. Out stepped Ted Mitchell, the HOA vice president. Karen's face lit up as she'd just been handed divine backup. "Ted, perfect timing," she announced triumphantly. "Daniel here is spreading false accusations about me while I'm trying to enforce our standards." Ted looked uncomfortable as he walked toward us. "Actually, Karen, that's why I'm here." Karen blinked. "What? Why?" "We've called an emergency board meeting this afternoon," Ted said. "The board has some concerns about your actions." Karen's smug expression cracked. "What concerns?" After Daniel's email, several other residents came forward with similar complaints, Ted explained gently. "People say you've been entering their property without permission or inventing violations that aren't actually in our guidelines." He shifted awkwardly. "Plus, the legal implications he mentioned about address tampering are serious. The HOA could be liable." "This is ridiculous," Karen shrieked, her voice reaching a new pitch. "I've devoted 3 years to maintaining standards in this neighborhood. You can't possibly be taking his side." "It's not about sides," Ted said patiently. "It's about proper procedures and staying within our legal authority." But Karen wasn't having it. She jabbed a finger at me like she was casting a spell. "He's making a mountain out of a molehill. It's just house numbers." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, I filed a police report this morning. Tampering with address identifiers is a misdemeanor in this county. The officer seemed very interested in my security footage, as if the universe had impeccable comedic timing. A police cruiser slowly turned onto our street at that exact moment. Karen's face drained from furious red to chalky white in seconds. You called the police? She whispered hoarsely. Over house numbers? Over trespassing, corrected, and tampering with safety equipment. Address numbers are considered critical infrastructure for emergency services. The cruiser parked. The officer stepped out and approached the small crowd. Is there a Karen Wilkins here? He asked. Karen raised her hand weakly. Her earlier confidence had evaporated. Ma'am, I need to speak with you regarding a complaint filed about property tampering and interference with emergency identification markers, the officer said professionally. We have video evidence of you removing and changing house numbers without the homeowner's permission. I'm the HOA president, she stammered. I was just enforcing our standards. The officer nodded politely. I understand, ma'am. But the HOA authority does not extend to altering address identifiers. That's regulated by the municipal code. I'll need you to come to the station to answer some questions. Watching her face as reality hit her was almost worth the entire ordeal. She stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish struggling for air, as the officer calmly explained that she was facing a misdemeanor charge, a fine of up to $1,000, and potential civil liability if her actions had caused any emergency response delays. But I was just trying to maintain neighborhood standards, she whispered, her voice cracking, as the officer gently guided her toward the cruiser.